So,
as
as a survivor of domestic abuse, I personally would say that there is a significant difference between somebody shouting at somebody versus like people starting to physically strike people. I have been involved in situations with my fiance where we've like shouted at each other, where maybe that might fall under that 40% figure, but none of that is even remotely similar to the actual physical hands-on like domestic violence that I experienced 11 years ago.
Well,
if the word is so bad, then we just shouldn't say it. Nobody should say it. It's like, I think it's pretty simple. If you take like that hard line of a stance against the word, I think you're pretty committed to that position. But I don't think you just say like, yeah, I don't think anybody should say it. Rappers shouldn't say it. People in media shouldn't say it. Like, we shouldn't say it online. Like, just nobody should say it.
I still think that you can't enter that conversation until you've achieved racial equality. And I'm not saying that as kind of like,
okay, let's go. Okay, sure. Let's go. Do you think that there's a measurable difference between a long time ago, well, maybe even arguably today to some extent, black community, rapper communities had a lot of homophobic issues. Do you think it's okay to criticize them on homophobic issues because they're currently being oppressed, or do we have to fix their oppressions before we address the homophobia?
I think you can criticize the homophobic issues.
I have to do this with everything, but I like to apply consistent standards. So I have to do the same thing when it comes to BLM a lot, because a lot of conservatives that try to malign BLM will cite like 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people that even run a website called BLM, and they'll start citing things and citing things. It's like, hold on, dude. BLM is not a coherent organization that everybody's associated with. Yeah, I have to wheel out these same arguments all the time.
What's your camera? It's always so nice.
It's a Sony A7 III. But it's super overkill for streaming. There's an A6000 or an A6100, I think, will also look about the same as this. This camera has like a lot of advantages, like being able to shoot in low light conditions and whatnot that like doesn't matter for a streamer. So this is like monster overkill.
That's pretty cool. Hey, can I ask one more question before we
knock yourself
get started? Is it true you identify as non-binary now?
Yep.
Congratulations. That's
Why?
Awesome. Well, that by definition would make you one of the largest representative trans streamers on this platform.
Yeah, but that's really weird. I got a lot of messages like, congratulations. I don't know if I'm comfortable with that.
Really? Well, explain why.
It just feels really weird. Like, why congratulate me for like a sexual identity, I guess. It's kind of like a strange feeling, I guess.
Because you are very successful at what you do. You're one of the top streamers on this platform. And then by definition, if you are now going to be able to be representing the trans community, I think that would be a net benefit to human rights in a way.
So I'm a representative of the trans community now. I didn't ask for this responsibility. Now you're giving it to me.
Well, it's not what I've... All right, well, that wasn't my implication. But I'm just saying that's... Okay, well, then if you prefer I don't say congratulations, I will.
Thank you. Thank you for respecting that.
All right. Absolutely. Could I talk to you about a couple things after you grill me on the army?
You can talk to me about whatever you want. I don't really want to grill. There's like 2 questions. There's 2 thought paths that I just wanted to run down that it seemed like it kept getting avoided. That's all I'm really curious about. We don't have to have like the whole debate or whatever. I was just curious about a couple of things.
Oh, people in my chat are asking, is it he, him pronouns?
Yep.
And are you dude positive as well?
Am I what?
Dude positive. It means can I say like dude to you or without offending you?
Yeah, go for it. Unless you ever call me transphobic, then I'm going to police that really hardcore because it makes me happy to do that. But otherwise, I don't give a fuck. Okay. Or you know what? If you want to, you can call me Miss Destiny. Because you know what? Destiny, that's a girl's name or woman's name. I fucked my own meme up. Fuck! Okay. Yeah, okay. Anything else?
His time. No, I was wondering if I could talk to yourself after the army. But yeah, go ahead. I'm ready to be received.
Okay. So that... Because I'm not interested in like trying to do the gotchas right now or whatever. I'm not super mad or anything. So I'm just for a whole interview, or for an overview of kind of like the guiding thing of this conversation. It felt to me like there are a couple things that you were kind of dancing around or were uncomfortable addressing head on because you feel like you understand that it would have changed the nature of the conversation such that you wouldn't really be talking about a particular topic anymore. And those are the things that I'm interested in. So more specifically, it kind of felt like you're just like anti-military period, and then arguing about whether or not Twitch can advertise on the platform like was an extension of that belief rather than any type of rooted idea that they shouldn't be allowed to advertise because of some TOS violation or something like that. So that's what my questions are going to be geared towards that. And more specifically, my question is basically going to be, so one question would be, where should the military advertise if not on Twitch? I'm curious, like, what your criteria would be there. Like, where would an appropriate advertisement for the military be?
I think the same places that it's able to be received by adults. I think Lycan brought up the example of cigarette companies not being allowed to advertise on Twitch, for example, right?
Yeah, but does it really make sense if the military attempts to recruit? I think it's usually like 18 to 22 is like, especially if you're offering like college, like, isn't that... How do you market an advertisement towards them? that group of people.
Because I think I was pretty good at establishing the fact that they actively try to recruit younger members of society, right? Usually starting at 15 years old.
Well, I think that's kind of when you like make them aware. So technically, by military rules, you're not supposed to make any offers. Now, what goes on behind the scenes is hard to say. Like technically, you're not supposed to proposition people for athletic events either. But I don't know if that's.
They're able to enter high schools, right?
Yeah, well, like, isn't that like pretty normal for almost all corporations? Like, don't you have like job fairs and shit at high schools where people, or at least in my high school, we did that, where companies would come and talk to the students, like, oh, if you pick this for your junior classes, and when you're a senior, you can do this, then you can maybe go to college and intern for us, or blah blah blah.
So it's different for the military. They actually, after the Bush No Child Left Behind Act, got access to be able to enter high schools without having to be part of job fairs. They can actually just set up stands there and stuff of that nature. And I know this is totally anecdotal, but I did speak to veterans yesterday who said that they were firsthand recruited. One of them, she was homeless. She was recruited while she was homeless, and she was also recruited when she was 15. And the early recruitment practices that they would use is, instead of actually actively recruiting them into the military, saying, hey, you don't have to sign anything yet. I know you don't have a parent or guardian to do that. But they started doing programs where they would say, why don't you just come out on Wednesdays to work out with me? And the other two vets said the same thing. They were like, yeah, when we were younger too, they had workout programs that had nothing to do with, are you going to join the military? It felt like almost like family building kind of exercises for people who had broken homes.
Yeah, that kind of thing doesn't necessarily surprise me. Like I said, I'm sure with like college sport recruitments, you're not supposed to make any direct offers until they're graduating or whatever, and then those are heavily restricted, but there's probably some somewhat malicious stuff that goes on there as well. Although I don't know if, I guess I would have to know more of the specifics. I don't know if what's being offered here is necessarily even a bad thing. If you have somebody that's like legitimately homeless and somebody's offering to like work out with you or like share a space in a gym for you to hang out or whatever, I don't even know if that's necessarily like the worst thing in the world, I guess, or...
Yeah, I think we'd be getting deep into morals and ethics there, wouldn't we? Because we'd be describing...
Would it be preferable to just leave them homeless, or...?
Yeah.
Really?
That's a very good question, because she's like, ultimately I had a negative experience. She was sexually assaulted as a result of being in the military, as well as she was part of the Yemenis blockade without wanting to be. She was actually told by her supervisors that she was supposed to monitor submarine activity for ISIS, and it turned out that she was actively involved in the Yemenis blockade without her knowledge. So she's actually deeply resentful of the military, and says that it was...
Yeah, so the Yemeni blockade thing is shitty. I can't speak to specifics in terms of military doctrine or how you're informed of like the operations you're on. The sexual assault thing, I'm sorry, but if we're going to pretend that sexual assault is a huge part of the homeless woman experience, I don't know what to tell you. Probably way more so than the military, I would imagine as well.
That's true.
Homeless women are exposed to a lot of like really violent, disgusting shit. Unfortunately, it's part of a huge problem with like women being homeless. Yeah.
Well, the difference being there, she wasn't recruited into being homeless. She was recruited into being in the military. So then...
Yeah, sure. I'm just thinking, like, if somebody is homeless, I feel like there's a lot of situations that are probably preferable to being homeless, but I guess it depends on what we mean by homeless too. I don't know if homeless, that we're getting into the weeds here. I agree. Because like homeless can mean like I live with my aunt and uncle and I don't have like a solid home, or it could mean like I'm literally on the streets and, you know, I don't have food security every night. I'm not sure what they mean when they say homeless. So depending on like, because if they're like staying with like family members or whatever and they get recruited into the military, that's pretty shit. If they're like drafting them there and they had other opportunities or other options, I can agree that like that feels really predatory. But if they're like homeless, like on the fucking street, I'm a little bit more like, okay, I don't know if it's that bad at that point, but I understand we're kind of like in the weeds on that one.
Here's something big I'll grant you, okay? Because I was thinking about this afterwards, because I watched some of your review yesterday. When it comes to Lycan, I thought of the best steel man possible for him that he didn't even mention, and this is something he could have brought up to me, is the NFL, for example. He could have said like, well, Lance, if you're okay with banning the military, are you okay with banning the NFL? Like the NFL.
Well, he already kind of brought that up with the boxing example, I think.
Oh, yes, yeah, that's kind of related. But the NFL is like a good example because they are on Twitch, right? I don't know if the boxing league is on Twitch, but the NFL actively shows like games and stuff like that. Well, okay. Well, first off, do you think that there should be absolute free speech on the Twitch platform for content creators or streamers? I'm
absolute free speech? Yeah, probably not. Does that include like hate speech or stuff? Like I'm sure that companies probably want to...
absolute free speech would be, right? Like that's what 8chan or 4chan kind of is were trying to do before they got regulated.
I mean, I'd imagine for any company that's going to be selling like advertisements, that's probably going to preclude absolute free speech. I don't think any company would survive that way right now.
But I'm talking about you. Like, if you were running Twitch, would you allow for complete free speech? Like,
Are you asking me like in a world where I have like infinite money, or in a world where I'm also trying to secure?
no, where you created Twitch, like you're the CEO.
Yeah, I don't think you can have absolute free speech.
this.
The platform wouldn't be viable. You'd have a lot of people that would shun the platform. You'd have a lot of advertisers that would shun the platform. Like, yeah, I don't think it would be viable with absolute free speech.
So do you have an idea in your head where you would set the boundaries for that? Because I didn't even think about this going in, but this ultimately does have to be a conversation about, because you want to isolate. Why do you want to kick out the army versus something else? Is it just because you hate the army? Because that's not really a rational decision, Lance. That's just you, right? Do you have like a
so I mean, like, it just seems to me that like I don't see, in terms of like all the people that come and advertise on Twitch, I don't see a problem with like military recruitment being one of them. I think there's a lot of types of jobs that you can work. As a kid, I don't think that joining the military is necessarily a bad thing. I know a lot of people have positive experience with it. I know there are a lot of people that have negative experiences with it. But I mean, like, assuming you're able to weigh the pros and cons and figure things out, like, it's just like going to college or any other type of life decision you have to make at an early age. I don't see there being like this huge intrinsic negative that's like unique to the military that other organizations don't necessarily possess.
Well, okay, my pushback against that would be that I think that there's a huge amount of statistics to back up that the results that you have from entering the military as a career compared to other jobs will have like a lot higher rates of things that we would both consider negative, right? High rates of drug abuse, high rates of people ending up homeless, high rates of people ending up in incarceration. And those who end up in incarceration also have high statistics of being incarcerated because of sexual abuse, for example.
Does that track on to like every other type of industry? Like the military is just default higher in all of those cases. Like,
right. So that is a really good point, and that's the one that I wanted to be able to talk about here. So, for example, Lycan brought up cops. He's like, Lance, would you ascribe this to cops? Do you know about the police 40% rule?
Is this the domestic violence one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally fabricated. It's completely fake. Yeah.
What?
Yeah, I hear this thrown out by lefties all the time, and I tried to look this up, and maybe you have done research for it. When I tried to research this, I found that like one time in front of Congress in like 1980, somebody referenced some study, and I never could find it ever. It might have been like an informal poll or something of like 10 but I could never find like an actual study on this. I hear that thrown around all the time. If you want to look for it, I could be totally wrong, but I look for this quite a bit because I was really, that's a really extreme claim. It was like 40% of police officers like are engaged in domestic violence, which is way over the norm for U.S. families, but I could never find like an accurate citing of that figure.
Wow. Okay. Well, if that is something that's false, I'll have to go back and look it up. The article I'd been reading was what is it? MSNBC, The Atlantic. I don't know if they're both citing the exact same study. Sorry, you're the first person to ever tell me that you think that it's 100% fabricated. All right, let's look it up.
Here's like an Ask Social Science thread about it. I don't have this like right now, but I mean, I look for that because obviously if I'm going to argue about shit, I want to know if somebody's going to bring something that's going to like sink whatever I'm going to say. But I really tried to find this and I couldn't find it. This is an Ask Social Science thread about this thing that was posted a year ago, but it wouldn't surprise me if I'm being like charitable. It wouldn't surprise me because of the types of people that tend to be cops if they were overrepresented in domestic violence. I mean, that wouldn't be surprising to me, but just that particular 40% claim, all I could find was that somebody cited that in front of a congressional panel at one point in time, but like the actual study itself or anything like couldn't be like.
Well, I've like the first Google search pulls up a Yahoo Life article, and right away it's referring to a study that actually demonstrated that.
Yep, they all refer to the study, but then I think I'm going to link you. It might be this. It's having trouble loading.
Yeah.
I think this is what they all refer to though, is like this particular thing, and it just says like a study. Mm-hmm. Everybody in your chat that's super asked about it. If you guys have a study to like the actual thing, then go for it. Knock yourselves out. I mean, I know you all are really mad right now, but yeah, go ahead.
Disney, we can't do this thing where you just get angry at my chat.
I'm not getting angry at them. I'm just inviting someone to share a link or whatever.
Like I don't know why you do that. I'll be totally frank, because like I couldn't have a conversation with you and read your chat at the same time, because I know they're probably saying the worst things about me, like, oh, he's a snake, he's spineless, he's like, all the fish emojis are probably flying all over the screen right now. But I would find that overwhelmingly distracting.
Oh yeah, I don't think it is. I was just trying to make sure everybody has good information to be able to, you know. So if anybody has the link, share it. We can all, and it's a good opportunity for that. And I'm making them happy, because if somebody links me the thing, they'd be like, "Look, we all shit on Destiny," and then they'll all like celebrate together. It's like I'm looking out for everybody's happiness here, Lance. Okay.
All right, absolutely. Okay, so I again.
But anyway, I'm sorry. Go
pulled
for
up-
it. I would just, without any evidence at all, I would probably believe that police officer families, because of the type of people that tend to become police officers, it wouldn't surprise me if they were overrepresented in domestic violence. That wouldn't surprise. I would probably just accept that, at face value. Sure.
I've got numerous studies popping up here now. Johnson LB, 1991, 1992 study from Washington, D.C., the printing office. 40% of domestic families experiencing violence from Joshua Klugman, the Associate Professor of Sociology and Psychology, another study. Like, this is, yeah, okay. So there's multiple sources on this. Here, can I send you this one?
Yeah, I guess we want to. I'll check it out.
Well, again, I don't want to hold this up because like I hate when conversations go to this house and like, did you not know this? Oh, that's not true. And then we just go back and forth until we've. So if you are being charitable, the reason I like when you say you think of that as a gravitational thing, as in people are predisposed to want, or people who would want to enter that job force would do that. I personally
Real quick.
think the exact oh yeah, go ahead.
Fuck. Okay, sorry. Okay, because I read what you linked me. So real quick. Okay.
Yep.
10% of the spouses of ostensibly police officers, I think, reported being physically abused by their mates at least once. The same percentage claimed that their children were physically abused. The officers were asked a less direct question. So the police officers were asked a less direct question. That is, if they had ever gotten out of control and behaved violently against their spouse or children in the last 6 months. We did not define the type of violence. Thus, violence could have been interpreted as verbal or physical threats or actual physical abuse. And then that's where the 40% comes from of the self-reported police officers that said that they had gotten out of control with their
approximately at that point 40% say in the last 6 months they engaged in it.
But that could have been like,
that would be slightly pedantic to say that this isn't enough to constitute abuse by my definition if I don't particularly like agree
so
with that
as a survivor of domestic abuse, I personally would say that there is a significant difference between somebody shouting at somebody versus like people starting to physically strike people. I have been involved in situations with my fiance where we've like shouted at each other, where maybe that might fall under that 40% figure, but none of that is even remotely similar to the actual physical hands-on like domestic violence that I experienced 11 years ago. That is not even remotely similar. Now, I'm not going to say that either type is okay. Nobody should obviously shout at each other. I'm just saying that like when you throw out the 40% figure, the idea is that 40% of cops go home and beat the shit out of their significant others, which I don't think is fair to say. That's all I'm saying. It's not super relevant.
But we don't. No, totally. And of course, like lived experience and personal experience is important, but also at the exact same time, we'd have to use a standard, right?
Yeah.
One that obviously most people agree to. So within the standard definition of what is considered abuse, even if it is mental abuse, for example, in this survey, that is still resulting in the 40%.
Sure, but we would have to hold that against, well, what is the standard in society? I don't know if we poll people in society, what are the percentages of people that like get angry at their significant others?
This is the standard in academia, clearly, right?
No, it's not.
Used for this own study. It's not.
No. Standard in academia is not abuse. Is considered like whenever somebody raises their voice. If you're doing like a more particular survey, I think that's why in this article, it's very clear to point out that this is exceptional, the way that they do it, right? Like the reason why they come out and say like,
well, they have to explain their methodology. Otherwise it would be pointless.
Well, sure, but I'm just saying that like I don't think that the standard in like social sciences when you're reporting abuse is like somebody got mad and shouted at somebody. Like that would be clearly delineated. Usually when you talk about like domestic violence and whatnot. But okay.
All right. Well, anyways, the reason I was bringing that up is because you look at that from a perspective of police officers will commit that violence because people who are predisposed to that kind of activity will gravitate towards that job, being a police officer.
It seems to be the case. That's anecdotal, though. My experience with police officers and everything is they're generally fucky people.
So for me, I look at this as if the training and the way that they're conditioned within these organizations is producing these results more so than I think. And the same thing with the military. Like I think high rates of either sexual abuse and or violence that's being committed by military personnel or veterans is not necessarily because those individuals gravitated towards that job in the first place, looking like they were predisposed to that violence, and that's why they became military men.
Oof. I mean, like, that's a hypothetical, but I think we would have to show that because, like, I could just as easily spin a counter narrative that says I think that certain types of people are going to be drawn towards these jobs, and that's probably going to result in like disproportionate figures when it comes to like violence or certain attitudes or whatever, rather than they're being trained at these jobs to be abusers or whatever.
The next one I'm sending you, because this one just came out today, so this one is from the Department of Justice of the U.S. and it's a survey of prison inmates from 2016, and explains about veterans in prison, and overwhelmingly compared to the national population. So they were twice as likely as non-veterans to be in prison for committing violent sexual offenses. Veterans are.
Okay.
So that relates back to, again, this seems to be an occupation in which it's producing violent effects in the people and the members that are part of it, whether or not you would
So just real quick, okay, I'm trying to be rhetoric dusty in 2021. That statement, you can say that, but you have no demonstration of that whatsoever, right? Like if I were to host a job fair, no, I'm saying that you can't show that like the training is what turns them into those types of people. You would have to demonstrate that.
Oh, true. Oh, yes, absolutely. But I'm
because
saying
if I had
we're
four,
looking at the end results of what happens.
Sure, I understand, but again, like if I had like 4 job recruiters on site, one was recruiting for Google, one was recruiting for Amazon, one was recruiting for Facebook, and the other one was recruiting for police officers or the military, right? And I did a longitudinal study following all the people that joined those 4 different groups afterwards. I'm going to find a massively disproportionately higher amount of all sorts of violent crimes probably being committed by the people that joined the police or the military or the construction or whatever, just because like so many of these things track onto class issues so hard as well, right?
Right, but I would posit that I don't think you're going to see those kind of rates being replicated in jobs that are nonviolent.
Well, do we think that? So here's a question.
And this is spurious, right? I'm just saying this based on the research.
So like, so here's like a question.
See construction workers who are ending up in jail for twice the rate of sexual offenses, for example, than they would.
Yeah, so that would actually be a question.
And I don't think you would make that statement either. Right?
Maybe, I don't know. I actually wouldn't surprise me. Maybe not that particular one, but like as a general statement, it wouldn't surprise me, for instance, if blue collar workers ended up in jail for violent crime more often than white collar workers, just because of how these like issues track onto class so much. That wouldn't surprise me. Do you think that would be entirely surprising? Or
not in I don't think it would be surprising to me if that occurred at a higher rate or an equal rate to the military.
Sure, but that's not what I'm asking. What I'm saying is that it's probably more likely that blue collar people commit crime, and I don't think it's because as a construction worker you're trained to be violent. There's like a big selection bias going on there.
Blue collar crime workers commit crimes. You would have to show me studies or stats on that though.
Well, you can't even conceive of that, but you really think it would just be totally equal throughout the? Is that like conceivable that you think that would be equal?
What's your justification for that statement? What is your basis for that?
Okay.
Why do you think that?
Okay, I'm going to answer this with another question. Why do you think so many black people commit violent crime?
I think they disproportionately commit violent crime because of societal conditions, historical conditions, systemic racism, systemic oppression, white supremacy.
Gotcha. Okay, so a lot of this is going to overlap with like the difference between like blue collar workers and white collar workers, right? That you're going to have some forms of like systemic oppression. We can call this like class oppression. You're going to have forms of like systemic problems related to lack of education, lack of access to opportunity, right? So like if we assume that that's true, and I would assume that that's true. I'm not a race realist, right? I would assume that it's probably going to hold true that most people in bad socioeconomic conditions compared to people that are in more privileged socioeconomic conditions are probably also going to like disproportionately commit things like violent crimes. That's going to be like an assumption that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Fair. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's totally fair because one of the biggest precursors for crime is poverty. So
being single parent households, having 2 parents working, not being able to afford after school programs. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
But that doesn't go back to the relation between this particular job and other jobs then. So you're saying that yes, and I probably agree with you, there's probably going to be a demonstrable higher rate of crime amongst people who are poorer. That's just the way poverty and crime are related to each other. But that doesn't change the fact that if you were going in and entering a job, say to become a construction worker or a pizza delivery person, that you were going to have the same and comparable rates of these exit statistics that you do with the military. Yeah,
it might not be the same, but comparable might be a question. Like, let's say, for instance, that the number was 10% for white collar workers. Let's say that it was 25% for military people, and let's say that it was 21% for blue collar workers. Do you think at that point we should say like, okay, well, hold on, I don't know if blue collar people should be recruiting either? Like, what are we holding these rates steady to?
Well, okay, here's a direct example back to the cop one. I know that you don't think that it's comparable to say that physical and mental abuse are the same, but say we take that broad definition of both physical and mental abuse. Yeah. Within the general population, it's experienced at 10%. Within police, it's experienced at 40%.
Well, that's the reason why. So like, I can consider that. Okay, let me be very clear. I can consider that like mental abuse or like verbal abuse is abuse. 1,000,000%. I would absolutely say that can be the case. But that 10% figure you're citing for like the common population, that 10% number is probably like a physical violence number or like a severe mental abuse number.
When the same standards are applied to both groups, it's 10% versus 40%. And again, would you say the one group is overwhelmingly, you don't differentiate between the two categories? I'm lumping the two categories in together for you there.
Wait, is that hold on one second. Ah, fuck. I'd be curious if that 10% measured if that 10% question was asked towards non-military people, the 40-10% one. I'd be really curious about that. I would be very surprised if 10%, this is totally anecdotal and I could just be totally wrong, I would be shocked if only 10% of American families had an experience where like a husband or wife were like shouting at each other. I would almost just not believe that on its face. I would be shocked if that was the case. But we would have to dig into this, unfortunately. I guess I can just grant you this, and then we could kind of move on from there. So do you think that like if a certain occupation, so the argument that you're making essentially is that you think that it's not certain types of people being drafted into these occupations. You think the occupations themselves are just training people to be like this?
I think it would be facetious of me to suggest that there's not a certain percentage of people who do gravitate towards those kind of jobs, like being a police officer or the military, because of course, they enjoy the power dynamic or whatever it comes from being violent or an authority figure. But when it comes to the military, the statistics show overwhelmingly that a very large portion of people who join it do not join it for those reasons. They don't join it either for the glory of the American empire or to be able to kill people overseas or stuff like that. 46% of respondents said they did it because of the prospect of having higher education.
Yeah.
So that
of those people that join for that prospect, I wonder how many of them are convicted for like violent crimes and everything. Do you think that
those
do you think
statistics themselves
do you think that disaggregating because I'm saying that like what if I could demonstrate, for instance, that hypothetical, but what if I could demonstrate that like 80% of the violent crime that was committed by people that joined the military were from people that joined from like very bad socioeconomic conditions?
Exclusively.
Not exclusively. They're like 80%. They're like a massive, like that you could explain a large amount of the gap between what wealthy, like normal white collar workers did or whatever you want, or the general American population. If I could explain that gap, if I would say, by the way, let's say that I can make this statement. If we were to just not recruit any more poor people into the military, then the rates of domestic violence, the rates of suicidality, all of that would more or less start to fall in line with the normal population. It would be roughly equal.
So you're saying if poor people weren't in the military, we wouldn't see those high rates?
Yeah, hypothetically. Let's say if that was the case.
You'd have to prove it to me or demonstrate it. Like, I wouldn't take that on face value.
Sure. Okay. I guess it feels like if we're going to have like a really strong conversation about because the counterclaim that you're making is a very, very, very strong claim. You're essentially saying that you believe that the military is training people to become these horrible human beings, which is
not intentionally, right? I think their training is training them to do exactly what they should be doing, which is be soldiers in large part. Especially if you're going to be a combatant, you should be trained in how to kill. The same thing with a police officer. You should be trained in self-defense. The problem being with the United States, unfortunately, is that they're trained so heavily in this shoot-first kind of scenario that it is producing those results that we see in the U.S. comparable to other countries. Like, other countries don't have the same police problem that the U.S. does.
Sure, other countries also don't have the same gun problem. There's a whole, but that's a really complicated thing. But I understand. But I guess what I'm saying,
you have to envision that, right? That if you are getting into a military mindset where they're training you to be a killer, in essence, that is going to change the way you think and act, and they want you to do that.
I think that we'd have to. I think I'd have to. We would both have to pull in people because I don't want to be accused of bias or whatever. But like, my understanding of military training is that you're not showing up like every morning. It's not like Attack on Titan where like every morning you're practicing like shooting at targets and murdering people and blah, blah, blah. Like there's a whole bunch of military training, especially depending if you're in the Army, depends on what your MOS is. If you're in the Navy or Air Force, depends on what your particular job is. Like that like the idea of like killing people might be like an incredibly minimal part of what you do in the military. Like a very, 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 very small part.
Ideally.
Yeah. So like the idea that all these people are going in and you're just constantly being trained to kill, and then like you take that home with you. I could believe that to some extent for the very small subsection of people that are like deployed overseas, especially in active combat roles. Absolutely, I could believe that. But active combat roles are like, it's like what, like 2% of like all military personnel. That's a very, 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 very low percentage. Pretty sure there are tons of MOSs or jobs available to people that just don't really want to do combat related stuff.
Okay, but when you see the statistic that twice as many people in U.S. prisons who are veterans are there for violent sexual assault compared to the regular population, would you justify that by saying that those people entered the military and they were already going to be like that, and then they left the military and then they committed those twice the rate of the regular public?
It's possible. But like, there's a lot of things that are possible there.
Like
I know you're going to say that it seems crazy, but I'm gonna still push back on because you're just trying to basically feed me the idea that like the military trains people to be rapists. But I could conceive of off the top of my head, I could conceive of two immediately valid hypotheticals that would need to be tested. One, and this would actually be a positive in those numbers. One, it might be that the military has very stringent like self-policing policies to where if you are caught doing that type of fucky behavior, you are absolutely charged every fucking time because the military doesn't want that shit because it fucks with the entire image of the military and it damages the U.S. military. So it might be the case that if you sexually assault a woman in a normal workplace at fucking Facebook or some shit, you know, Zuck walks by and he's like, oh, fuck it, like, you know, fire the dude or whatever. But in the military, they're like, yo, tribunal time, you're fucked. Like, you're getting convicted for this. Like, this is like, you're dishonorably discharged, you're gone. Now, I don't know if that's the case, but that in my mind, that could be totally valid. And then it could also be the case if there's a selection bias to where, you know, certain people enter the military that are more aggressive or blah, 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 and they might be more prone to this. Like, those are two, in my opinion, I think those are two perfectly valid hypotheticals. I don't know what the case is, but your case of just saying that, like, well, I think when you go on there, I think the training just kind of like turns you into a rapist, or it can unintentionally. I think that's a really extreme claim that I think requires more vetting or validation.
Do you apply that same line of thinking towards the high rates of suicide? The disproportionately higher rates of suicide amongst veterans than the general population?
For veterans, I think that I think we should be clear that I think that's normally talking about veterans that are in like serving in combat roles, right? That's not just like if
actually.
What?
It's both. It's both in combat roles, but it's also they have a much higher percentage of suicidal ideation than the general population.
So you're telling me that somebody that goes to like the Air Force and just works as like a electrical engineer is going to come out with like a significantly higher, because most of the stats that I've seen revolving around suicide are usually for people that were deployed in combat zones, and
well, I'm saying that would be a single anecdotal statement. I don't have that kind of information. I do know just as a generality, veterans have higher rates of suicidal ideation.
Well, sure, but I could believe that as being directly, well, almost directly causally. At least some percentage of that is probably going to be directly from your military experience, especially if you were in a combat role, because I know a lot of that is like heavily like directly, like you could get PTSD, you could develop other sorts of traumas, and you could have a lot of bad shit that happens, of course. Yeah.
And would you say then that that's also correlated directly to the higher rates of homelessness amongst veterans?
Yeah, potentially for people that were deployed into combat roles. Yeah, for sure, it could be. Yeah. I've read all sorts of like really negative mental aspects that come back from combat related stuff.
Huge amounts of drug abuse, alcohol abuse, stuff like that, right?
Yeah, thrill-seeking behavior, like lots of like really negative things happen when you go from that environment and then try to be reintegrated back into civilian life. It's a really difficult thing to do. Yeah.
Absolutely, and that would, I know you don't grant me this one, you grant me those first two, but you would, to me, that is also explanation that would be a reason why there's high rates of domestic abuse. That would be a reason why there's high rates of sexual violence, because I think it
could be. And I said earlier that
same conditioning.
I would believe on its face that like military people probably engage in higher rates than the average population. That wouldn't surprise me, just because of the types of people that are drawn to those jobs. I don't know how much is due to like the job training versus like a selection bias. To be very clear, the reason why I have to push back so hard against this is because that training thing is used in so many racist arguments that if I grant it here, if I'm arguing with like a Nazi in the future, those arguments are going to be thrown back at me 1,000,000%. You know, when people say like, oh, when you go to the military, it trains you to be a killer, blah, 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 just like how black culture trains black people to be killers, blah, blah. Like, I always have to push against that by pointing at the massive selection bias that occurs, at the massive socioeconomic lack of opportunity that certain people have. Like, these are the arguments that I have to wheel out to explain like disproportionate rates of violence between groups of people.
I don't think you have to do that though.
No.
Things, I'll explain why. If a Nazi proposed that to me, I would straight up say I don't think those two things are comparable at all. You can't tell me that black culture is similar to the indoctrination, training, and the equipment of the military. Those are two very, very different groups.
You absolutely can, and even people in the black community have fought against like especially like in the fucking 90s and shit, like the whole gangster rap shit or whatever. There are huge disagreements in communities about the types of conditioning that go on in popular culture, and rap especially. There's a huge.
Okay, so I'm not disputing that there's that conversation. I'm just saying those two things aren't comparable. They're very, very different. Like black culture versus the military and the way it's structured, those are two entirely separate things. Right?
I think
you can say that against the Nazi.
I think the comparison would be on its face, because the question would be, why do you refuse to accept that, like, you say that in the military they train you to be killers and blah 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 blah. Well, my counter argument is that, well, if you listen to certain rap songs, they're talking about killing people and doing drugs and all that shit all the time. And actually, to go one step further, there is actually direct links to certain types of music leading to other types of behavior. Look at like the fucking Juice WRLD shit and people abusing benzos and stuff, you know, more commonly now. I think you can actually draw like really clear links to these types of behaviors. So this is just.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So again, my push up against the Nazi would be that I still don't think those two things are comparable. You would have to demonstrate to me how there was an organizational structure like the military has, which is very easily demonstratable. This is how we train people. This is what we do. This is how the organization is made. This is the combat you may or may not experience, and this is the end results versus black culture as itself. Like,
well, I mean, I can show you a direct link right now. Like, here are kids that listen to this type of music. Here are the lyrics that they say. Some of these artists literally die from ODing themselves, and a lot of people that are listening to it are now doing these drugs at higher rates. Like, I think it's super clear. Like, this is one of the few things in life that I would say that, like,
that's not an organizational structure, though.
It is absolutely an organizational structure. There's a whole structure to the music industry in the United States, the type of entertainers that are producing music, and to the way that this music is distributed to the kids. Absolutely. There's a whole system behind it. But arguably larger than the military sometimes. I mean, it depends on, like, this is an international fucking conglomeration of companies and shit that distribute music.
I don't know if that's true, but again, in no way is that comparable, because you're talking, again, about a music industry and different facets of it and how it's released in the media. And you're talking about, again, a very easily identifiable structure, a government structure at that, right? Like, it's definitely not a one-to-one thing. It's not, but
listen, I agree with what you're saying about the music industry, because that's an argument that I would make. But I would have to apply. I haven't said anything
about the music industry yet.
Well, in terms of that, like, it's more multifaceted than that, right? I'm not just going to blame black people for a kid, taking too many, benzos and killing himself, right? I think that it's more nuanced. I didn't
say that either.
Well, you said that you wouldn't blame somebody for that, right? Because you'd say it's a little bit more complicated how the music industry and everything works.
I haven't even entered the fray of that conversation.
Okay, I thought I just heard you say that you would say that these two things are disanalogous because the music industry is more complicated, and you wouldn't just blame black culture for something that, like, a musician said. I think
they're disanalogous because I think one is just a cultural thing. The other one is an actual institution in which we can actually track how they operate, right? The other one is so nebulous. You're talking about something that is like, I can't even wrap my head around trying to make those one-in-one comparisons. But anyways,
sure, okay, yeah. I guess, like, I think that selection biases are real. They're very, very, very important to understand because they give us a lot of information about why people behave the way they do. And for somebody to just, like, blanketly claim that, like, in the military, because of your training or as a result of that, you become a domestic abuser, that seems to fly in the face of a lot of anecdotal data I know, which isn't data, just stories that I know. And then it also would need to be demonstrated that, like, somebody that would have gone into the military otherwise, like, there's a ton of ways that you can probably break out the data. You know what? Fuck it. I'll do a bunch of reading on stream because I'm curious about that. But just so I understand your claim better, you think that, like, your belief is just that training on its own, if I took somebody that normally wouldn't have been an abuser, they have a higher likelihood of becoming an abuser just because they received that military training.
Not just the military training in and of itself, being within that institution for many years, many years, and a culture that is reinforcing a lot of the negative things that perpetuate
gotcha.
Results.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. I'll take a look at that later. So then the question is if you believe this to be the case, and if that's your primary argument, why would you be okay with the military advertising anywhere?
I'm okay with them advertising in the same places that they can advertise towards adults in the same way, like cigarettes and prescription drugs.
Yeah, but if you truly thought that, like, this is an organization that turns people into, like, rapists and domestic abusers, why would you ever want them advertising anywhere?
Oh, why would I want them to exist? Well, ultimately, yeah, you're speaking my language, Destiny. I don't want the military as it is to exist. I understand just the pragmatic utility.
Yeah, so I understand. Like, so we're trying to avoid running back, because what I'm saying is that, like, because if you want the military to not exist, that's a separate argument. But we're talking about the military. So the military does exist.
Advertising, right? Okay.
And when it needs to recruit people, right? But if you believe that it's, like, so horrible that it shouldn't recruit kids, like, should it recruit anybody if these are the reasons we're given?
I think consenting adults should have the ability to join the military if they want. Absolutely, they should. Yeah.
Okay, so do you think that, like, should an 18-year-old have the option to join the military?
If that's the legal age. I wasn't being flippant when I said to, like, I think it's ridiculous that you let people join the military and not drink. So
yep, every single person in the U.S. feels the exact same way about that.
Yeah, I know. It's
Sure. So then my next question would be that
21. Sure.
I think, like, an answer this. I don't know if there's I don't know if there was an answer given. How would you feel if? So I'm sure you noticed that on streams we can mark our thing as, like, 18 or older. How would you feel if the military was only allowed to advertise on streams that were marked 18 or older?
Right. So I think I needed to clarify something because I got lost in the weeds with Lycan and I focused way too much on the domestic abuse stuff, and that wasn't being as clear as I could on this. I think the military as an organization which has a predatory behavior towards recruiting children shouldn't be allowed based on that. That should disqualify them, period, because they've already shown themselves to be disingenuous on the Twitch platform by trying to recruit people through contests and other means.
Okay, so the contest thing I was trying to find information about, but I couldn't figure out if that giveaway was ever completely fake? What did you ever figure that out? I tried to look stories up about that.
The article that I ended up sending to Lycan was pretty clear about
I read the
it.
article. They just said that it violated the TOS because they didn't make the terms and conditions clear on the giveaway after being directed to the landing page, which you're generally supposed to do for like lottery related stuff. So that's like a mistake, sure. But like, because the claim you're making is a bit stronger though. You're making it sound like they literally faked that entire giveaway, which is not my understanding.
I think, well, no. I think ultimately they probably give the Xbox. Well, I don't know whether or not they did that or not, but the fact that they use it as a way of just clicking and getting you to recruit directly to the military, like I was trying to show Lycan, they've done that before. That's far from the first time they've done that.
Well, sure, but like this is like almost how all giveaway. This is like a pretty standard. Like if you've ever heard of like a platform like Gleam, or there are other platforms where like, hey guys, I'm giving away things like here, like just click this and make sure you're following me on Twitter and Facebook, and then you get an entry.
But when you click on that, does it jump to another website that has nothing to do with the contest? No, right? It usually says sign up now, and you'll also get a whole bunch of like blah blah blah, and we get to send you newsletters and
oh yeah, sure. So
stuff,
again,
right?
I'm not disagreeing that like they probably should have made the, or not probably. I think legally you need to make the terms and conditions clear on the landing page. My only issue is that the way it's being characterized is it sounds like there was a huge scam and nothing was ever given away. That was my issue with it. In terms of like, should they have been more clear about the condition or anything? Yeah, definitely. I think so, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that's one reason of many, but I think, yeah, well, that demonstrates not only they're going to be duplicitous in their nature, but that is just like par for the course with their recruiting tactics, which seem to be primarily focused on recruiting younger people, right?
Well, first of all, of course, because the military needs younger people, right? Of course, you don't want to recruit people in their 30s into the military, right?
And yeah, so I'm against that. That's like, I guess you and me differ in that, right? Like you're
okay. So then, so on a more macro level, then you think that the military should shift their focus into recruiting like people in their 30s or late 20s, or
no, whenever they turn legal age.
Okay.
Adults should be able to make adult decisions. I don't think kids should be influenced into joining the military. Usually based on the fact that it's sold to them as something other than it is, right? Like, have you seen military commercials on TV? Like, have you seen those commercials? They're like, some of them are amazing. I'll give it to them.
So I've seen ones from like
a dude with a flaming sword.
Yeah, I've seen the Navy ones from like the 1920s. It's not that old, but like most of what.
No, 1990s is what.
I know. Okay, so like the majority of the recruitment commercials that I hear, and I could be totally wrong. This is just what I hear on the radio, and what I used to see on TV. The majority of what I see is the voiceover is like, hey, did you want to join the blah, 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 blah? Bet you thought that it was only this. Well, look at this guy. This is actually Frank, and he's now a systems engineer because when he joined the Navy, they taught him all about computers. Find out your opportunities. Now, those are the types of commercials that I used to hear. Now, I don't know if they're all about like fighting dragons and shit anymore, but usually when I see commercials, it sounds like they fucking ran down to some ITT tech and they grabbed a dude with glasses to sit in front of a computer and say like, hey, if you signed up to the military, you can be an IT guy too. That's usually what I see for military commercials or hear on the radio. They usually talk about like post military like job opportunities.
A lot of the new ones too are about what is it? You'll join for honor. You'll have dignity. You'll join a brotherhood. You'll be able to become a responsible man or a responsible woman in your respective field.
Sure, there's some. I'm sure there's some of that too. Although to be fair, one of the stated reasons why a lot of people are, for the people that are happy with the military experience, is because of the discipline they pick up in the military. Now, I don't know if this is the same for everybody, but for me personally, the only organization I've ever heard of that can take somebody and actually like instill some amount of discipline into them is our military organizations. I've never heard of anyone else being able to do that with like fucking boarding school or other types of work. Now, again, that's anecdotal, so maybe that's not the same case for everybody, but I have heard a lot of people claim that they had a brother, cousin, or like they themselves went into the military. They were like, they didn't do fuck all in life and they were kind of slavish or whatever. And then coming out, they had like more discipline than they ever would have otherwise. And then there's the education aspect too. Like we both acknowledge there are beneficial things you can get out of military service, right?
Yeah, I want to just that someone's knocking at my door. Do you mind?
Yeah, go for it. Knock us out.
Okay.
Oof, now I get Lance's chat on myself. They don't tell you that the only way you'll get a decent job / education is if you are so smart and skilled that you could have gotten the same job without them. Everyone else dig a hole. Hey, living in the green. I know that you're only 16 right now, but believe it or not, you need training and an education for a lot of the higher skilled jobs today. Sometimes the only access to that education is via joining the military. Which I think all the education stuff comes through is it the GI Bill, I think? Hey, Destiny, how does the boot taste like? Kinky Dora, are you referring to the kinky outfit that your mother wears when she steps on me with her boots? Normally, she's putting her boot on my dick, not in my mouth, so I really don't know what it tastes like, my dude. Thank you, though, for the kind comments. Hey, Destiny, you should talk to the left flank vets. Yeah, if they want to, sure. Hi, I'm a white dude who likes to play devil's advocate because other people's struggles are theoretical to me. It's fun to debate your rights. I'm here to exhaust you so I can stop progress and maintain the status quo, which serves me. I'm uninterested in learning. Your frustration is my goal. Oh, shit, dude. Wait, is this like Jeopardy? What is a Twitter leftist? Haha, did I get it right? Hi, Lance.
I'm back.
Okay.
What did I miss?
Oh, nothing. I was playing Q&A with my own chat.
Sorry, can I answer your question, though?
Oh, quickly? Yeah, go for it.
So I totally agree with you. There is some incredible things the military offers. In fact, the military is the largest social program in human history.
Jobs training program, often it is said. Yeah, correct.
Yeah, it's
and
wild.
Pathway to education.
What is it?
Yeah.
What is it? Three square meals a day. You get clothed. Yeah, you get fed, you get housed, you get educated. It's everything that I want. It's everything that I advocate for. I just want to get rid of the killing aspect and the imperialism.
Yeah, but the majority of the majority of the armies or the majority of the military is not usually about killing. It's like a pretty small part of it, depending on.
Oh, of course, yeah. I don't think they're just standing around waiting to kill all day, but that's one of the reasons that they're heavily trained and heavily armed, and it's also one of the reasons why the military-industrial complex is so interwoven.
Well, even in terms of like heavily armed, I think in the military they assign you a firearm when you move bases. Is that true in like the Navy or the Air Force? Does that happen? Do you get like I don't think that like these people are like doing weapons training and like murder training like every facet of their existence.
And just strapped to nines? No, of course not. But I'm saying we have, or you have, I should say, Americans, you have the means, and clearly you've demonstrated to create such an incredible social program.
America has the means to do so much, but we just don't have the political will for it. I'm not going to disagree with you there.
Yeah, well, that's why when people talk about the military and they're like, isn't there good aspects? I'm like, of course there is. I like the idea of having all these social programs. I just think these are programs that should be provided by society and not used as a reason to have a poverty draft. Like they shouldn't be a reason.
Well, so I mean, I push back against
to get education.
Yeah. So, well, firstly, I would push back against the poverty draft. I don't think that's true. I think actually, because I used to use this talking point a lot, and then somebody challenged me on it, and I looked it up, and I'm pretty sure that disproportionately the middle class is overrepresented when it comes to military recruitment. It's not disproportionately poor people, which was surprising to me as well. But you can look that up. Maybe I'm wrong on that, or maybe my data was wrong on that.
I have a follow up to that, but sorry, keep going.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be cool to offer these things outside of that, but I don't know if there's necessarily anything wrong with offering it. Like, assuming, like, here's something that would be important to me. This is what I think would be really important for military type stuff. If you join, I think that ideally, I'd have to think about this because I'm coming up with this on the fly, but if I were to join, I would want to be ensured that, like, what I'm doing isn't necessarily combat related. Like, I think that maybe you should have that option. Or at the very least in times of like not being like actively at war with another country, that you or at least you should be informed of that or have the ability not to. I think that if something like that existed, if that type of guarantee were made possible, then I think that I feel like I'd be like pretty okay with these types of like recruitment things.
Okay, so to answer your first point, the poverty draft is absolutely 100% real. That actually got debunked, the idea that it's simply the middle class that's been joining the military. So the majority of people who are joining the military are obviously very young. When they were polling them, they were polling their parents' income. And they were usually polling their families' incomes rather than polling the individuals themselves at the point of which they joined the military. And I found that out yesterday. So
that's normal, but that's how we determine things for generally, right? Like that's how we determine for the FAFSA. Your same thing is.
Of course, but if you produce data and you put it out there saying that the military is actually a large portion of it joining happened to be either middle class or something else, when the individuals joining in a lot of cases, sometimes they could have been estranged from their families. Their parents' combined income do not represent their income because they aren't even generating income in a lot of cases. Like that didn't take away from the fact that a lot of them actually had been recruited from lower income areas of the United States. That's what they said that was thoroughly debunked.
Okay, I guess I would have to look at that because it feels like you could play with the data a lot. Because technically, at that point, like every single 18-year-old is fucking broke. I mean, it's not like you're gonna find all these wealthy 18-year-olds. That wouldn't. I guess it's possible. I'll have to look into that. I guess because that would be a good argument against it, which I would use. So, but yeah, okay. I'll you know what? I'll write that down.
I am not for, by the way, censorship or broad censorship. I think like a really good example, if you want something comparable instead of the NFL or something like that, is InfoWars, because there's an example of an actual organization that got deplatformed from streaming, from doing all that kind of stuff, and it wasn't just an individual, it was the organization itself, right? InfoWars as a sum total org cannot be on YouTube ever again. Neither can any of the employees representing InfoWars, for example, right?
Yeah, wait, how does InfoWars compare to this conversation though?
Okay, so I was trying to make the example with Lycan that as an organization, the military, I would say if you put this, like the sum total of their actions together, I would say because of both the net negatives and the fact that you will have a whole bunch of risks by entering this, you could end up, either homeless, high rates of drug abuse, all that kind of stuff, right? That it's predatory for children to join it. So I would say as an organization, it doesn't have a place on.
Why was the military any more predatory than like any other kind of job recruiter as like an organization?
Are job recruiters allowed to go into high schools? Like, not
My
not
understanding
as part of fairs.
in my
No,
job,
no, not as part
yeah.
of fairs. In general, can a job recruiter just walk into a high school? The answer is no. I think you know that, right?
I don't remember. It's been a long time since I've been in high school. But I thought that
No,
you could have
should,
like
dude.
signs
But,
and shit up, but maybe they were all part of job fairs or whatever. But like,
yeah, but a job fair is an actual, like, they make a day of it. Like, it's not like recruiters for Costco can just walk into a high school. Like, you know that's true. That they would be laughed out of the room.
well, there would have to be like a setup for it or something, right?
Well, of course it would be. Like, I don't know if you're being flippant with me right now.
Well, no, because wait, when you're talking about like just walk in the room, like the military won't do that either. You're not gonna be in the room and all of a sudden like an army guy will break in and be like, who wants to join, guys? Like that's probably not gonna happen either. I imagine you set aside
they're
like
allowed to enter. True, but they're allowed to enter school grounds, and then once they're on school grounds, they're allowed to speak to whomever they want, whether it's the principal or the teacher, and be like, "Hey, today can we do this? Can we have a workshop? Can we have a class? Or are we allowed to just stand in the cafeteria with sign-up sheets?" That's the other thing they're allowed to do. They're allowed to just be present in the school and walk around and be like, "Hey, kids, have you heard about this? Have you heard about joining the military? This is a future you could have."
So I would be okay with that if private companies can do it. I don't know if private companies are allowed to or not though.
They're not. No.
I mean, if they're not, then I wouldn't be okay with that. But I don't know if this is true. I would have to
That the military can do that.
that the military.
I
So
would
you're saying
be-
that like I'm not trying to be snug at it. If it's, I don't think that I don't think that the military should have exclusive access to a high school to advertise job recruitment. I think that's bullshit.
Amen. I completely agree. They shouldn't be in there. Yes.
Yeah. Like maybe like universities should be, but otherwise, yeah. But I would have to look that up. But yeah. But I mean, if that's the case, I obviously wouldn't be okay with that. But I don't see a problem with having like military recruiters as like part of like a job fair or whatever alongside any other job. Fuck. Okay. I don't. So I'm seeing a lot of people say things like Microsoft literally used to host workshops at my school looking to recruit students. They absolutely are. Local companies were permitted to recruit my high school multiple times. I just don't have the information here, unfortunately.
No, fair enough. And like, but okay. I think people in your chat are probably completely correct that there are workshops or there are things that they set up. I don't think though that there's any situation in which like a company is allowed to just enter high school grounds for the purposes of recruiting without having to set something up in the form of, like you said, a job fair or a recruitment day or a recruitment fair or something like that. Like, can a member of Costco or a member of Microsoft just walk onto school grounds? I think like we both know the answer is probably no, right?
I really don't know. I just don't, because I've never seen a military person do it either. If I saw that, would be really fucking weird to me. So if like military people do it and normal people don't, then that would be like really fucking strange to me. Would you be okay with the military being there though if it was like part of a job fair?
I don't think the military should be allowed to advertise the kids at all, to be honest. The same thing with you couldn't, like Marlboro couldn't advertise working at a cigarette factory to kids. They wouldn't be allowed to be part of the job fair, would they?
So what about like
we set a standard on what we can or cannot allow in that job fair for kids, right?
Sure, but like, so wait, but like you would be okay with like any other company advertising there, just not the military?
Specifically, the military would be amongst the things I wouldn't want, but there's other things. Like I probably wouldn't want it like a tobacco company trying to recruit children either, right? But I'd have a much bigger argument for the military itself.
Sure. Okay, so what about like job fairs that are restricted to like seniors in high school, like people that are 18 or older?
If that's the age at which they're allowed to recruit, I'm okay with that.
Okay, so job fair stuff for like high school seniors.
It's wherever we establish that they're adults. It's no longer predatory. They're no longer trying to appeal to children, right? They're adults. At which point I would then want to construct a secondary argument about whether or not we're doing this exclusively to recruit poor people, which I still think the poverty draft is a thing. Like I haven't really ignored that either.
Oh shit. Okay, fuck. Okay, I just have to read this just so we're clear. Destiny, from the article that you just had open, do schools have to allow military recruiters on campus? Yes, but only if the school already allows colleges and prospective employers on campus. Federal and state laws require that high schools give military recruiters the same access to campuses as the schools provide to other people or groups who tell students about job or career possibilities. If that's the case, assuming this quote is correct, then I'm okay with that. I think it's weird, but like I also think it's weird that companies are trying to recruit kids at 16. But if private companies can do it, the military has to be competitive with those private industries.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay. So we're okay with the military recruiting kids in high school as long as they're 18, because you wouldn't consider them kids anymore. They'd be 18. Are you okay with universities trying to advertise to kids that are beneath the age of consent? So if they're like 17 or 16?
Yes. I am okay with that. And I know that was the example that Lycan was trying to trump me on. But
Yeah, so I'm kind of curious because in some ways you're going to argue that the university commitment is more serious because I think for your military contract there are ways to get out of it, but like for your
okay, well I'll bring up the biggest point of all. None of the things that you've mentioned so far in the sum total of our conversation have been things in which if you enter into them, you have a contract that if you break it, you go to prison. That hasn't applied to any other example that we've mentioned so far.
Is that
Correct?
the case? I don't know, actually.
That's 100% the case with the military.
If you what I'm asking, if you default on your student debt and you don't pay it, I know they can garnish your wages at some point. Do you ever go to jail for not paying your student debt? I don't know if that's the case.
Did you
also
just declare bankruptcy?
No. In the United States, we have a very special condition that student loan debt cannot be discharged in bankruptcy. Why that is the case? I can guess, but yeah. Also, I'm pretty sure there are ways to get out of your military contract, your 4-year contract, that don't involve you going to jail. But you'd get like a dishonorable discharge. So however that looks on your record is, I guess.
Well, there's actually organizations. People were sharing the link. If anyone here is in the military,
I'll admit, you probably can't leave in some circumstances. Like if you're in the middle of a deployment, you probably can't like leave at that point. That would probably, yeah. But in terms of like if you're working like a normal job, domestically, and you want to leave, I'm pretty sure you can get out of your contract. You would just get a dishonorable discharge.
So there's an entire organization set up called GIRightsHotline.org that is set up to try and help people leave their military service if they want to. But yeah, you absolutely cannot just break your military contract under.
Sure, but you can't break any contract, right?
Yeah, ultimately, but if you break a regular contract, and again, if you're appealing to kids, if you're trying to recruit kids to join this university, first off, you can't say that it's a one-to-one comparison because you're going to have a student loan that you may like have to forfeit on. Like you don't know what the financial situation is of the kid, but just by definition, you joining in that organization, which is the university, doesn't make you enter a contract into which you could face jail time if you do not do it.
Yeah, potentially. I don't know how big of a deal this is, though. There are ways to get out of your military contract without like going to jail. I don't think I don't think that has to happen.
Right, but that's a pretty huge deal. You're doing something, in my opinion, that is predatory towards children that could lock them into a contract. I mean, we
keep saying predatory towards children, but it sounds like you're saying like literally advertising anything about like what you do after you're 18 when you're before 18 is predatory towards children, which is kind of a weird standard because we do this all the time, right?
Well, no, recruitment tactics aren't just being like, hey, by the way, here's a TV ad and now we're done. It's conversations. In the case of the individuals I was speaking to, the veterans I was talking to, they were actually doing like weekly events with them, in order to.
Yeah, this sounds like good recruitment tactics, but universities will do the same shit. You'll have like in my high school, we had dual enrollment at some universities and they would advertise their college to you, or people would come onto campus and like do like, yeah, this seems like people. What's that? You'd have like recruitment tactics are used by all sorts of people. Universities are super fucking
No,
thirsty.
the dual enrollment thing, I didn't know.
Oh, dual enrollment is like you take a class it's at a high school, but it's also like a university class instead. So sometimes you'll go to the university to take the class, sometimes you just get credit for it. Like,
yeah. But again, the things that you do in a university, I don't think are comparable to the things you do in the military. And
well, sure, those things, yeah, there's going to be different things depending. I mean, it super just depends on what you're going to university for, right? Like you can go to university, get a 4-year degree, and then use that to go into the military as an officer. Like that would be using your university credentials to just enter the military at a higher pay grade. Like, I mean, there's tons of things you can do.
Right, but you also wouldn't fly a plane to bomb Yemenis children in a university. And I'm not
First
saying
of all, I don't think we fly
every single person in the military does.
Also, I don't know if we ever fly planes to bomb Yemenis children.
No, it's true. You don't.
It's
No, you absolutely don't. No, but I'm just saying as an example, right? You like you're not going to do the same kind of things potentially in a university to what degree that you would in the military. Like they're.
Yeah, I guess, but like,
again,
but like talking about, but I mean, like, yeah, but like potential, like, I don't think that's relevant to the conversation. Like, we need a military. We need to recruit people into it. Like, you might have some crazy shit that comes up as a result of like what you do in the military. But I mean, you're going to be relatively well informed, or you should be in terms of what that is. I don't think anybody like randomly winds up in front of a screen like pushing drone strikes and they're just like, holy shit, I had no idea. Unless you're like Ender from Ender's Game, I guess, and you're tricked at the end of the book. Like,
how many people do you need in the U.S. military as standing personnel? Because right now it's in the couple million, right? But in order to maintain the U.S.'s like global hegemonic power that it is, you don't need the same numbers that you have. Like, there's not as many standing military interventions that require the same levels of recruitment that they have right now.
Yeah, but the military does like all kinds of. The military is not just there to like invade people, right? Like the military is like a very, very, very widespread thing that like does a whole bunch of different types of like work, right?
Yeah. But work, I think that should be done without a military. I think you should be able to go to school and get fed and get educated by your government without having to also.
Yeah, I understand that, but that's not at all related to this argument, right? Because using that same thing, I could argue against literally every single recruiter ever. Like, I don't think that Facebook should be allowed to advertise that they're going to pay for your degree if you'll go work for them. You should be able to get that for free. Like, we could use that same argument against literally every single recruiter for everything.
Oh, as an actual organization? As in society should be providing that for you versus.
Yeah, you could say that for every single offer that any company could make, we should just provide for free, and then we could use that to argue against literally every single type of recruitment ever.
I don't know. Did you get all the answers you want out of me for this one? Because I kind of wanted to ask you about something else, but I also don't want you to think that I'm pivoting or snaking or weaseling or.
Yeah, sure. I guess so.
Doing whatever animal cracker you think of it.
Yeah.
Can I ask you about?
You can ask me anything you want. Okay.
I saw you go on a panel not too long ago, and apparently you have a new version of the N-word debate that I wanted to ask you about.
No, it's my same position as always, but go ahead.
Okay. Tell me if I'm wrong and steel manning you here. Okay. Originally, you contended that it was okay for you to say the N-word in private if you were in the company of friends who you knew were also not racist.
To be clear, okay, so yeah, so just real quick, because we can go down a whole. So the broad argument is that I think that there are certain jokes that are inappropriate to say in a public context because you don't have control over the humor in a public context. People can take things you say in ways you didn't mean them, or people are listening that you don't want to hear a particular type of humor, and this can be used in a negative way. That was essentially my argument. And then in a private context, a lot of those concerns necessarily disappear or could disappear.
Okay, and then you've expanded this now. Again, correct me if I'm wrong on this, that you now think that as an overarching idea that no one should be able to use it or everyone should be able to use it. That it should be kind of like a complete freedom of speech when it comes to, or none at all.
So the most common pushback that I get against my position is people will start to make this nebulous argument that if anybody says any type of a certain slur ever, they might inadvertently poison their mind or say it around people that don't know, or they'll let it slip into their normal speech, or it'll cause them to think other thoughts. But like basically these types of arguments. And I can say like, okay, sure. I can grant that and say, okay, sure, that might be true. Maybe if you say certain types of jokes that are harmful, or even just a slur that could be harmful in a private setting, that maybe that could bleed over and have negative effects on your mind in other cases. But if that's the case...
Because you normalize it, right?
Potentially, sure. But if that's the case, then we need to condemn every single person that normalizes that. So all references to the N-word in pop culture should be demonized. Any form of music or song or whatever where it's being used, all of that should be ubiquitously. Because if it was the case that nobody was using the N-word in any form of culture, then nobody would be saying it anymore except for racist people. And you would immediately know when somebody says like, oh, you're a fucking racist. What the fuck? And that would just make things super simple, I think. It would be way more consistent. Because trying to float on this weird, like, well, it has to do with reclamation, even though it's being massively sold and profitized to white audiences and is causing them to hear the word way more, but it's different because like blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, well, if you're going to say that there's some damage that occurs in some private setting, you have to acknowledge that there's some damage that occurs when that word is constantly flaunted in front of everybody in like massive pop culture where tons of people are consuming it and sharing it and everything as well. It's probably not good too.
Does any of it have to do with the double standard? Out of curiosity?
Double standard? No, I don't think so. Well, because I imagine like, standards would be different. Standards would probably be different than versus in-group or out-group, I think, right?
But there is a bit of a double standard if it's the fact that everyone can either say the word or not say the word. And if someone is permitted to say the word or a certain group is permitted to say the word, then they're getting separate treatment, either by society or
it's not about a separate treatment. I don't care what the group is. We could be talking about Hispanics only being allowed to say the N-word or white people, or like we could make the groups whatever we want. I just think that if we're going to say that some particular word is so harmful and so deadly and so dangerous that if people hear it and normalize it, it's bad, then we should all stop normalizing it. Meaning in terms of pop music and everything as well, like we just shouldn't have that word being said anymore anywhere.
Right. So my pushback there would be that I think that there is already obviously a huge double standard in the way society oppresses black people compared to white people, right? And I know you're not going to push back against that one.
No, generally I would agree.
Yeah, and because we have these these systems and hierarchies that are obviously oppressing black people, that the idea of differentiating and associating this word, which has historically been used by white people to oppress black people, the idea then of having a double standard now in modern day society seems to me really low on the like. If I agree with you in principle that no one should say this word altogether, but I think you can only apply that standard once you have actual equality. Because
that's so weird. Wait, whether or not we have equality or not, because it doesn't matter. If we're agreeing, because now we're making some very weird out there argument. If we on its face agree this word is really bad and nobody should say it, or like we need to reduce it from our vernacular as much as possible. I was like, okay, cool. Then like nobody should say it, including rappers. Like that's a disgusting word that like needs to be gone. And like there's people in the black community that will argue this too. Richard Pryor was a huge proponent of this. He would never say the word again after he went to I don't remember what country he went to. But there's a famous speech that he gives about how like, oh, I went there and I didn't see any N-words anywhere. You know, we were all just black people and everything was cool and beautiful and chill. And I'll never use that hateful word again. You know, Dave Chappelle's had issues with this. Chris Rock's had issues with this. Like it's not even like people act like I'm making like a super contentious claim, but like there are people in the black community that will debate whether or not like rappers should use like this particular word as well. I don't think that's that crazy of a statement. I'm just saying if we're going to say it's so fucking harmful that white people rapping along with a song is going to like cause harm, then we probably should like try to get rid of it as much as possible.
But in your examples, I think that black people have a right to basically have a debate on whether or not, you know, it's being said within their own communities.
No, you don't. That's ridiculous.
That black people have a right to decide whether or not they use language within their own communities?
Well, it's not within their own communities. You don't have a right to...
That's the sentence I just said.
Sure, but that's not the debate that's being had. No, if you want to argue whether or not you can say something in your own communities, that's my argument. That's a private language argument. But we're talking about like pop culture. We're talking about like what is popular in entertainment, and we're talking about yeah. You don't get to have Sure, yeah, I'm saying you don't get to have you don't get to have an individual conversation in your community about something that affects the entirety of the public. That's just not something like you have to take into account how it's affecting the public at large. That's part of being like that's part of being a public figure, right? Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And at this point right now, it seems to be this strange. I think it's like you mentioned something that is confusing to you. Like, what if someone is Asian and are they allowed to use the
there's a lot of like silly like exceptions and things where people get lost.
Right.
Or whatever,
and so as a blanket statement, would you not think it would be fair to say that currently, as it is, there's a hierarchical structure in which white people have been and are still continuing, you know, the white supremacy from an academic standpoint is that white people are still continuing to oppress black people. And as a result of that, this is like a double standard that I don't think is too much of an ask. Like white people should just not say the N-word in general.
Like in terms of prescriptive statements, I don't think I would necessarily disagree with you, but we're just talking about like the impacts that like certain types of humor or jokes can have like on a broader scale. If we really want to get rid of the N-word completely, then we should just have everybody stop saying it. I don't think that's that contentious of a claim. That's like super simple, I think.
I think it's super simple, but I don't think it's fair to do. Well,
it's not about what's fair, right? If we were to take gamer bros that are using the F word, the F slur for gay people, and they were to keep making the argument over and over again, oh, well, like we don't think that like it's that bad. We're not targeting gay people, blah, 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 blah. You would ignore, now I know everybody wants to say like, oh, it's different, it's a reclamation, blah, blah, blah. You would ignore every single argument they would make. And what we would do is we would appeal to the end effect. And we say, well, the end effect, we don't care how you use it. It's causing a negative harm to society. Well, if we're going to apply that same standard to the worst slur in all of human history, blah, 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 then we should all probably just stop trying to say it. We should stop making money off it. We should stop using it in media. We should just like get rid of it as quickly as possible. And then it would just make everything better if we really believe that it's that problematic.
So you're saying from a fair standpoint, that doesn't matter. From a utilitarian standpoint, what is going to be the maximizing the best possible scenario for everybody?
Yeah, or even, I mean, you can even argue this from a deontological or virtue ethics standpoint. If we think that that particular word is so bad, it's hard to imagine that we would ever accept like anybody using it, that it would be ever good. At least using it in a way to make money selling it to audiences that shouldn't use it, because that shit's just going to lead to so many weird problems down the road.
Okay, so if fair is the bad word here, then it's hard for me to wrap my head around this concept, but I don't think if one group is currently oppressing another group, while they're in the middle of oppressing them, they have a right to also point at them and say, I'm going to dictate your speech. That's what I'm trying to get at here.
But we would. We absolutely do.
Well, no, we are doing that.
We should
doing that. Yes.
If black people came out, if black separatist groups came out who were identified as a nation of Islam and they wanted to say some like crazy anti-Semitic shit, we would police their language as well. We'd say like, hold on, I don't give a fuck if you're being oppressed in society or not. You can't get away with saying shit like this. It's having really bad effects on society.
Absolutely, I'm not disagreeing with that. So I guess the only thing you can look at this is as a prescriptive statement, as in we ought to do this in the future. That's the only way in which you'd agree with me in that principle.
As a prescriptive statement, we ought to do this in the future. Like nobody uses the word at all.
That's what you said earlier. No, not that. Well, that we have a right to make that after we've basically eliminated inequality, and especially racial inequality.
No, I don't think that we can allow some harms to be perpetuated in society just because another inequality exists. These two things are wholly unlinked to each other. Like, for instance, indigenous peoples in Canada seem to have a really big problem, like being raped and going missing and the police not doing anything about it. Now, that seems to be the case. I don't know if that's been fixed in Canada yet. Probably not. That seems to be the case. But like, even if somebody cited that wouldn't mean that I would allow, say, like a native ceremony that involved some sort of harmful thing that produces a really bad effect on society to occur just because they're currently experiencing oppression by Canada. Like, we would still be able to dictate things that are overall beneficial to society, even if some oppression occurs. I don't think these two things are linked at all.
Yeah, so what you're referencing is called the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women in Canada that goes along a place called the Highway of Tears. So you're saying that the government of Canada itself shouldn't be allowed to, or should be making active prescriptions in order to solve that in the interim?
I'm saying that whether or not a particular group is being oppressed isn't going to factor in much to me thinking whether or not they should be able to do something that we all agree is harmful to society.
Well, the argument there would be that not everyone sees it as being harmful to society if it's used within an in-group, for example.
But it's not. That's the problem. It's not used within an in-group. We're not talking about reclamation and use within an in-group. We're talking about the mass commodification of it to markets of white people.
I hadn't brought that up yet, but I guess that's where we're at now.
Well, that's kind of what I'm talking about, right? Because if this was just like, let's say that it was a bunch of black people that got together and they were doing like a fucking slam poetry or some shit and they used the word a lot or whatever, I think that's a totally different context. And at that point, I think it would be cringy as fuck for me to come in and say like, you guys aren't allowed to say that here. But that's because that's how I view like private language. I would never make that assumption. What I'm saying though is that if we say it publicly, and we mass commodify and we sell it to especially white people publicly, and those are the main drivers of that thing publicly, well, then it kind of makes me wonder. It's like, hold on, like we're telling all these people that they shouldn't say a certain word because we agree that it leads to societal harms and all these bad things and they're oppressing this group of people, but we're still going to make money, like in a way, almost implicitly encouraging the behavior. That just is strange to me.
Well, because the dynamics are very different between, obviously, you know this, a white person and a black person saying it. The use of it was originally used by white people to oppress black people. So if black people want to use it now as either a way of commodifying it or making money off it, I don't know why that would be something you'd want to take away from them.
Well, because if we think the word is
not acknowledge.
Yeah, it's easy. If the word is so bad, then we just shouldn't say it. Nobody should say it. It's like, I think it's pretty simple. If you take like that hard line of a stance against the word, I think you're pretty committed to that position. But I don't think you just say like, yeah, I don't think anybody should say it. Rappers shouldn't say it. People in media shouldn't say it. Like, we shouldn't say it online. Like, just nobody should say it.
I still think that you can't enter that conversation until you've achieved racial equality. And I'm not saying that as kind of like...
Okay, let's go. Okay, sure, let's go. Do you think that there's a measurable difference between a long time ago, well, maybe even arguably today to some extent, black community, rapper communities had a lot of homophobic issues. Do you think it's okay to criticize them on homophobic issues because they're currently being oppressed, or do we have to fix their oppressions before we address the homophobia?
I think you can criticize the homophobic issues.
Okay, so if we think that a group of people is doing something that's contributing to like more racist thought in the United States by pervasive use of the N-word, why would we have to fix their oppression before criticizing this behavior? Like, just don't say the N-word.
Because that group is, the group in your example here is black people.
Okay.
I'm asking. No, I'm not
yeah, we're talking about like black rappers is what I'm talking about, yeah.
Okay, so you're saying because that is contributing... It's different though. It's very different if a black person uses it than a white person uses it. You understand that? It's not the same use. It's like words have different use, meaning and connotation and weight and gravity based on the context.
Yeah, I agree with that. But like, I don't know how much, like, so I think we're going to get into really, like, if you're talking about like calling somebody like the hard R, of course, that's way different. But if we're talking about like somebody referring to like a friend using like the A version, like in terms of like, is it different? Like, well, I guess like in a total contextual societal vacuum or societal like consideration, then yeah, it can be different. But in terms of like usage and context, not really. I don't think so, especially if somebody's literally singing along to a song. I think that's like a way, like to argue that this is substantially different is like kind of weird, I think, or is a really hard argument to make. Hard argument. So I'm sorry.
What if we made a prescriptive statement that just all non-black people can't use it? Then it makes it easy, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that, but then it would be really, really weird to sell that behavior to white people. Like, that just seems like really confusing to me. I feel like it would lead to a lot of societal problems, but it just seems like it has.
Well, but that's your challenge because you're a communicator. So now it would be upon you to.
Well, I wouldn't make that prescription because I would never expect people to be able to consistently follow that because it's confusing as fuck. Like, I even have problems with behaviors that I do where I say like,
easy.
It's
just
clearly
like,
it's not though. We like where we're at right now in terms of like the culture. There's a lot of weird shit. Like, can 6ix9ine say it? You know, can Lil Peep say it? There's like a lot of weird shit that goes on.
You're gonna talk about Blood Contwin. Yeah.
Blood. Oh yeah. Well, I wasn't even getting into that. I'm just saying that like there's a lot of like it's just a very weird issue, and it just seems like at the end of the day, I don't really give a fuck that much. It seems like we waste so much time obsessing over this though. Like this is like the most fucking pertinent issue. Like if you were to rank like the most important issues, you know, facing black people, number 3 is like U.S. criminal justice system. Number 2 is like single parent households. Number 1 is, you know, white people rapping along to songs. It just feels like this issue gets like such a huge amount of time that people care about.
I completely agree with you. I'm saying it shouldn't be an issue concerning the black community. This is an issue concerning white streamers and their use of the gamer word, really, right?
Well, not even actually. Sometimes it's literally just like, because you see like, I think that Vogue editor girl, do you remember the Vogue editor, the teen Vogue editor that came on, the head editor, and she got kicked out because of some dumb Asian tweets she made when she was 17? Have you followed this at all? Okay, they're stupid. But one of the people that canceled her, now she got canceled because I think when she was 15, she tweeted out like calling somebody like my N-word, the soft A or whatever, right? I don't know. It just like, and people get really fucking mad about this shit. It just seems so stupid. I don't know. I just think that like I think that my position is like pretty consistent. I think that if a word is so absolutely fucking horrible that it's causing all these problems, then just nobody should say it. We shouldn't be selling it. It's really confusing to sell it. Like everybody's gonna have like disagreements over other shit. And if we think that they can sell it, well then we probably should just look at like how words are used, like we would with everything else. Like every other single word in the English language, every single one we look at how they're used. Like some people use different words to refer to black people that are really bad. Some people, you know, use words in ways that they aren't that bad. You know, like I can hear some people say like, oh, like, you know, this guy, you know, acts like a thug or whatever. And it's like, okay, maybe. But then if I hear like Fox News talk about like thugs and gangsters, well, now I'm looking at it a little bit differently. You know, I think we do that with every other word in the English language. I think it's generally pretty obvious when somebody's being racist, but I don't know. That's how I view it.
By the way, the people in chat, I guess, who are here from DGG telling me that I want to censor all language. I don't. I'm not trying to control or police personal speech. That's not what I'm here for. Like both me and Destiny are public figures. That's why I'm bringing this up.
Guys, why isn't my windmill working? It's not doing anything. Yeah, you can ask anything you want.
I'm gonna bring up your other favorite topic, and that's Kenosha.
Yeah, what about it?
Okay, so you said a couple times on the record that you don't think that, or you don't think it's fair. Again, tell me if I'm not strawmanning you correctly here. Steelmanning you here correctly. You don't think that it's fair to characterize Kyle Rittenhouse as either being, a white supremacist, or having ties to white supremacy, or being tarnished with the idea that he is a far right figure, or that plays into it. Is any of this correct?
At the time of the shooting, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And what about now? Has that changed, even post-shooting?
I mean, there was the picture of him with the Proud Boys or whatever, and it might be possible that he is now. It wouldn't surprise me after everything that's happened, but yeah, that might be the case now. But that doesn't change anything I said in the past whatsoever. That's not how any of that should work, right?
Okay, yeah, no, absolutely. So, were you aware that when he was patrolling that day, that he had been doing so with members of the Boogaloo Boys? So, when I looked into this, you're saying members? I saw some people were saying that there were white nationalists in the audience, and he was with white nationalists. What I looked up was there was one person that had been making like bad tweets in that entire like anti-protest, and that people were using that to say the entire protest was full of Nazis because of that one guy that was there. If there's like evidence that he had been like out directly, you know, hanging out with, and I don't mean like as part of a group of 100 people, it was like hanging out with like 2 or 3 Boogaloo boys and they were going around together. Yeah, I would have been warmer to that argument, but that data didn't seem to exist at the time. It's totally possible that some more stuff has come out and it's like, oh yeah, he probably was a white nationalist at the time, sure. Okay, so he was patrolling that day with a man named Ryan Balch.
This is the guy that I'm talking about. Yeah, I don't consider that valid. Yeah.
Okay, so they were patrolling together. So whether or not you accept the fact that Ryan Balch is a white nationalist would be another topic, right?
Yeah, I don't know if he is. I know they tweeted a lot of associating stuff, but like, I don't think him just being in a group with that guy. Like, I don't think these guys were close friends or anything. Like.
Right. So the implication from the Southern Poverty Law Center article on the subject shows the two of them one-on-one, basically patrolling as a team, like the two of them, right? In the photos that they have of the two of them.
Sure. But that still doesn't speak to anything at all about their friendship. I'm sure that, like, especially my canvassing event, you could probably go find me like one-on-one chatting with a ton of people. I don't endorse or subscribe to the political views of all those people, not even remotely close. And I would never try to say that like somebody is a Nazi or white nationalist or whatever just based on one person they've been trolled with. Like, I would need to see some sort of pattern behavior, especially because Rittenhouse is fucking. He was like 7 years old. He must have tweeted or Facebook something. Like, I would expect to see something somewhere.
I agree. Okay, but you can start at the beginning with Kyle Rittenhouse, right? Obviously, you know that he's a Trumper, so he was obviously that. He was very pro-cop, right? He had already LARPed around as a police officer. You'd seen him posting both the thin blue line and the Blue Lives Matter things. And neither of those are...
None of this even remotely moves you to white nationalism or Nazism, yeah.
No. I'm not saying this in and of itself paints him as a white nationalist or a Nazi, but you understand both that the Blue Lives Matter movement and the Thin Blue Line movement, those are far right to right wing reactionary movements to the Black Lives Matter movement. Right?
Yeah, but a ton of people, because people on the right aren't dog shit at their messaging, a ton of people get caught into these movements that aren't like white nationalists or racist or whatever. My mom shares fucking Blue Lives Matter or Blue Lives Matter, Thin Blue Line, but then again, I guess a lot of your community probably thinks my mom is a white nationalist. But yeah, no, I don't think that like being pro-cop or whatever for a lot of these smaller communities especially makes you a white nationalist. I don't think so. I don't think that even gives an inkling of a leaning into that. I don't even know if I would say that like most of these people are far right. A lot of them might just be standard conservatives, but...
Sure. So, but you understand the connotations behind using that kind of imagery, right? Using the Thin Blue Line, using the Blue Lives Matter imagery.
I do, with that connotation.
Specifically tried to turn violence against cops into hate crimes through legislation. Like, that's one of the things that they were trying to push for.
Okay. That's still not getting any closer to white nationalism, but they might have, but okay.
Absolutely. I'm not, none of this is like...
Okay, yeah, sure, that might be the case, yeah.
I got you.
I'm willing to bet that the majority of people that follow it probably don't know that, but sure, go ahead.
Sure. Well, the actual imagery of itself has been so co-opted by extremist movements that people in Canada aren't allowed to use it if they're members of government. Like, you can't, as a police officer, use Thin Blue Line, Punisher Blue Line, any of that imagery anymore, because now it's been co-opted by extremists. Okay. So it's gotten to that point.
Sure.
The Boogaloo Boys as a movement, what are your thoughts on them as an organization?
I honestly don't. I think I read... no, because I mix them up with the Proud Boys a lot. I don't know anything specifically about the Boogaloo Boys.
So the Boogaloo Boys are trying to usher in what they see as a civil war between the races. That's kind of like their big ideology. And then that's basically their guiding compass. A lot of them are white nationalist, far-right extremists. Some of them have nothing to do with any of that, right? There are a lot of them that just say that they're in it because they enjoy the memes. It's like any organization. You'll see people on both ends. Anyways, he was patrolling with a member of the Boogaloo Boys that day who has now been outed as posting as well as believing a lot of far-right white nationalist bullshit, right? Like Nazi stuff, posting, you know, Nazi memes, Trump memes, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I saw the Facebook shit and everything, yeah.
Yeah, who's also come out and disavowed Kyle Rittenhouse and said that he doesn't like him anymore and he doesn't consider him a friend because of the reasons being that he, A, lied to him, said he was 18 years old when he was 17, and B, also told everybody that he was a medic when he wasn't. So that's also in the same article, but it's in the Public Law Center. I'll send you the links to both of these.
Yeah, I literally read this article on stream because I was trying to find some evidence of him being a white nationalist, and this was like the one that gets cited all the time was this whatever the BLA, whatever that guy's name is, yeah.
That in and of itself, though, I mean, like, for me is pretty, I don't know, sus. Let's just say that.
I wish that you had a better view of like how people outside the internet worked and how like real life people can meet people and they don't know anything about them because they're not terminally fucking online. I'm just saying that, like, I know that everybody is going to cringe at me, and that's great. I'm okay being cringed at on the internet, but the idea, like, I'm imagining you go up to a real life person and it's like, did you know that I know that Becky is a horrible person because the person that she was with yesterday, remember how 100 of us showed up to this thing? She was walking with a guy, and when I looked at his Twitter feed, he was tweeting some stuff with the Pepe the Frog, and that guy's a went. It's like, dude, like, this is just not how these people work in real life. Like, I'm sure that a ton of people probably showed up. There were a ton of people walking around and doing shit. Like, I've seen a lot of shit from Kyle's life. Kyle looks like a standard conservative, like, wannabe LARPing cop dude. He was like, before that day, he was cleaning off fucking graffiti on the walls. He apparently volunteers in some little junior cop program.
He was just a good old boy, right?
Yeah, basically, yeah. It didn't look like, but I mean, maybe to you, all of those people are fascists, I guess, because apparently everybody's a fucking fascist or Nazi now. I don't know. I think that there's like an important distinction to be made between like this guy is a fucking white nationalist versus this is like a good old boy, country boy that just fucking loves cops and like is whatever dumb shit.
Okay. Well, what about very recently when he went to a fucking bar and then hung out with the Proud Boys doing the OK symbol?
Yeah, I saw that recently,
explicitly
sure,
in the photos.
It wouldn't
singing the White Power, sorry, not the White Power, the Proud Boys theme song with them. Like,
yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if after the fucking Kenosha shit, if he does turn into a white nationalist. Absolutely not. With the way that like people generally, I mean, fuck, everybody called him a white nationalist anyway. Why the fuck not? It wouldn't surprise me at all if that was the route that he took. And if somebody told me right now, even just seeing the kind of company that he keeps now and the type of people he's reached out to, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me right now if he was a white nationalist. Absolutely. But I don't think there's any evidence at the time that he was.
Are you this generous normally to like every single person that you dissect? Because I feel like you're giving him such a wide range.
Unfortunately, because I spend more time. Yes, I have to do this with everything, but I like to apply consistent standards. So I have to do the same thing when it comes to BLM a lot, because a lot of conservatives that try to malign BLM will cite like 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people that even run a website called BLM, and they'll start citing things and citing things. It's like, hold on, dude, BLM is not a coherent fucking organization that everybody's associated with. Yeah, I have to wheel out these same arguments all the time. That people aren't 100% subscribed to the belief of every single person you can catch them in a photograph with. Of course. I do this for the left and the right all the time because people are so fucking thirsty to instantaneously come out and say, like, oh, I know that guy's a racist. I know that guy's a crazy Antifa super soldier. I know that because I got a picture of him with this guy. It's like, hold on. What has this guy actually said before? What has he actually posted on social media before? What do I have him on record saying? Because just seeing somebody walking with somebody else is not enough for me to subscribe that person 100% to their ideology. Whether we're talking about a Nation of Islam, black separatists, or whether we're talking about a Kyle Rittenhouse walking with a guy that posts dumbass Groiper memes or whatever.
Sure, but you like, I don't think any of that stuff happens in a vacuum, right? When you start to see all these things, like there's an occurring pattern. He's even entering something that is obviously highly racially contentious, right? Like the very idea of entering Kenosha armed, especially something that is related to the Black Lives Matter movement, where there's, yeah,
you see it as racially contentious because that's the only lens that we have to look at it through. We're privileged. We don't give a fuck what happens in Kenosha. It's not our community. These are all just conversations we have online. But for the people in that city, what? Oh yeah, true. That's right. You're not even in the country. But for the people that live there, for the people that are watching businesses getting burned to the ground, for the people that are watching their communities being destroyed, right? They probably feel a much more personal connection to it that supersedes like whatever, like, oh, we're looking at this through the lens of white versus black.
There's no way you could ignore everything else that's going on. Like, I can't believe that for a second. That
I know you can't,
so
but this
much
is
more of
the
a reach,
biggest problem.
But so would the average person. Like the fact that he would just have blinders on and go there exclusively to protect property, and that's it.
So this is one of the biggest issues. I know it seems impossible. One of the biggest issues that lefties have, and even progressives have this, is that individuals never feel their class. An individual does not interpret things as a class. An individual always feels things as an individual. Okay, well then, when somebody sees their fucking buildings and shit being burned down or their communities being attacked, they're not thinking like, well, I understand that was burned down because in the greater context of this conversation that's happening in the United States, there are some rioters that feel like they haven't been heard by the system, blah, blah, blah. They instead, say like, holy shit, my community is fucking under attack. I gotta fucking get out there and do shit. Like half the imagery that's come out has been like fucking white people that are setting shit on fire anyway. It's not even necessarily black people.
Yeah, of course. So while he's not thinking instantly, basically as a white person, I have to go do this because this is something I have to do. I'm not suggesting that. But as someone who definitely loves police, who definitely loves cops, who has definitely seen that there's a racially charged problem in America, and this is a focal point of that racially charged problem involving violence specifically against black people from the police. And I'm going to enter that area with a gun.
Wwhy would any of that like motivate him? Like, oh, well, since it's this thing, I'm not going to intervene now.
He's advocated that he's for the thin blue line. He has posted memes about that. He has LARPed as a police officer. He's wanted to become a police officer. He is on the side of the police in this debate, in this argument.
Yes, but being on the side of the police does not necessarily make you a white nationalist or a fucking BLM hater or...
I agree. That's not the argument I'm making. I'm saying, though, that he obviously is entering this with some connotations of what is going on. It's not just a I understand. Boy looking to protect.
Sure, what you say with some connotations of what's going on, though, but you're making it sound like he entered this as though he was going to be a representative of the fight against Black Lives Matter in the United States. I don't think that's the full context of how he comes into this. I think it's just his community is...
No, that's an exaggeration.
Okay, well, that's kind of... It sounds like when we're talking about, like, I don't think he's taking this totalitarian, or I'm sorry, the view of in totality of all the conflict around the United States. It's probably just more like, hey, my community is being attacked. I understand there's this broader conversation, blah, blah, but I'm going to show up.
I'm team police and I'm anti-team Black Lives Matter, right? That would be the thin blue line.
I don't know if you have to be...
It's a pushback against the Black Lives Matter movement itself, seen it as cultural.
He wasn't showing up to protect police officers. He wasn't walking around against police officers. He was walking around against local businesses and shit.
Yeah, of course, but in an environment that is...
But on that entire environment, that's not what he's considering. He's just there to show up because he wants to be there for his like fellow fucking community business shit.
neither of us know what he's considering, right? We have no idea what's going on.
Well, I'm based on what wait, hold on.
From an
based on
what to paint that picture.
No. Everything paints my picture, okay? The footage of him doing graffiti shit, the footage of him doing cop shit. You don't have Kyle Rittenhouse on record saying a single thing that would even remotely imply that he's anti-BLM or that he's a white nationalist. All of that is conjecture based on one person that he walked with for a few minutes at an event with hundreds or maybe even thousands of people.
Walking and patrolling with a white nationalist who was heavily armed, and then after
did Kyle Rittenhouse
showing up at a bar and then partying around with Proud Boys, doing the OK White Power.
You're conflating. I know that you think this strings your argument. We're not speaking to anything. We're not speaking to anything that happened after the event. I'll tell you that afterwards it's totally possible that he becomes a white nationalist. It wouldn't surprise me. I'm sure every fucking white nationalist in the country wants him on his side, right? That wouldn't surprise me at all if that became the case, especially because he's 17, and especially because he's gotten so much pushback from the other side. People radicalize to the other end extremely quickly. That being said,
90% of what I've talked about was before that event.
Well, then why would you throw in why would you throw in your strongest piece of, because the only piece of evidence you have of him doing anything remotely resembling a white nationalist happened after the event.
Well, I mean, no, the strongest piece of evidence is him probably patrolling with a white nationalist.
You really think he knew? Do you have any evidence? Wait. Do you have any evidence whatsoever that he knew anything about what that guy believed, or even that he was even friends with him? Are they even have their accounts?
I don't have evidence. I do not have evidence.
Sure.
Of what he
There's
believed.
no evidence of them ever communicating on social media, of them being friends or followers of anybody of themselves on social media. We have zero evidence whatsoever that he even knew this guy's fucking name.
But so all of these events that I mentioned, though, is that just like all in?
You haven't mentioned anything. Everything that you mentioned has been no. You're trying to paint this picture of it being coincidences when all of it very consistently points to just a kid that fucking liked cops and wanted to grow up and be a fucking cop because he's some white country kid that like, oh yeah, I like cops. Police officers are cool. Every single thing you said is evidence for that.
A scenario in which there is a position that is being put where cops are being pitted against this Black Lives Matter.
He's not showing up to defend cops. He was showing up to be at businesses, though. Their counter protest was not about showing up and being anti-BLM or showing up and being pro-cop. It was about them walking up and down and watching businesses. That's what it was about.
But in the like, you enter an area, whether it's a war zone or something, you can say, I'm entering that area as a peacekeeper. I still have to be aware of what this is happening, like what war is taking place.
Sure, but like, what is the alternative then? So
especially if I have already said that I have strong alliances to one side on this. I don't think he was going there personally to murder anybody. I don't think he was going there to kill Black Lives Matter protesters, right? I would never make that contention, but I think he's fully aware that he's entering something strongly on one side, on the Blue Lives Matter side.
I mean, like there's literally video footage of him giving fucking water and shit to like people that are marching and protesting and stuff.
Yeah, there's also video footage of him going up to a group of like 3 black teenagers, I think. They're standing by the road, and then one of them is like, yo, you're the guy who was hassling me with a gun or something. And then he turns away and like walks away from that crowd. Like, I'm not...
Okay, so for the example that I give, right, there's actual video footage of him giving water and shit to protesters. I know that to be true. And the footage you have, you've got 3 guys that are like, wait, wasn't he a guy that did this thing? And not a single other person at that entire fucking rally will corroborate that or say anything related to that. And then also you're saying, and he walks away from that. What, is that a point against him? Was he supposed to sit there and argue with him? What?
No, I'm just saying that both of us, well, okay, neither of us know what is actually going on in his mind, right? There's no way for us to ever do that. This is all just us contending this based on the information that we have in front of us. And I'm saying to me, and I know you're saying this is just me looking at it from a lefty lens, all this stuff doesn't point towards, or it doesn't demonstrate to me that it's simply just a good old boy who was going there for the sole purpose of being.
But like, you have no evidence otherwise. Other than the fact that do you know who else marched with that guy? What about the fact that BLM and the Boogaloo Boys fucking, have marches together and shit? I don't understand why we would like cite this one guy walking with this one other dude when we don't even know if they know each other.
Well, because he is an actual white nationalist. That's why.
Yeah, but we don't even know if they know each other. We don't know if they're friends. We don't know if Kyle knows this guy's name.
I think that's a bit far. The statements after the fact said he doesn't like him anymore because of the fact that he thinks he lied to him. I think they knew each other, and even if not prior, they knew each other during that event. Do
you think that guy being a white nationalist came up at the event? Do you don't think this is actually really important because this is like the most important part of evidence you have is that like, well, they marched together. I'm sure that I probably marched alongside or walked alongside a ton of people that have had some pretty fucking horrible beliefs, but I don't ask somebody every fucking opinion. I don't fucking know. I'm just there to do whatever event I'm doing. Right,
but you understand that in that march, then you are beside someone who you probably have to align with on some level ideologically. I'm not saying that you're going to be like, hey, Zig Kyle, okay, cool, we're nice. I'm saying that, hey, we're both here and we're both pro police and we're pro order and we want to protect businesses together. All right, now this person may have a whole bunch of like terrible beliefs underneath that, but at the same time we're still marching decidedly on this side, which is to protect the cops. We're on the pro police side.
Sure. I don't think that's necessarily bad. I'm sure there are some things that we all have in common with Nazis. I'm sure there are some things we all have in common with tankies. Like, we're going to find common ground on some issues in some places with literally any fucking human on the planet.
Okay. That was all I wanted to present to you. I didn't know if you knew about all that stuff. I didn't know if you knew about all those facts.
I went looking for it a ton because a lot of people made the claim, but that one guy, and I'll push you again because you said, because I corrected you once and then you re-corrected me. You said Boogaloo Bois multiple times. That is the only guy that I ever saw an article being published about that was a white nationalist in that audience.
I can say.
Was there?
Sure, I can send you the other one. There's 32 other Boogaloo boys who were present. That,
oh, okay. There might have been others that came out. Okay, that's cool. I didn't know that. But I've never seen any article linking this guy with Rittenhouse ever, other than the fact that supposedly they were walking around a little bit together. But there was nothing linking them as being friends. There was no propaganda. There were no racist memes or anything that Rittenhouse had ever published on any of his social media anywhere. I'd never seen any Sig Heils, anything whatsoever. And Rittenhouse is a dumb fuck 17-year-old, so it feels to me like if that would have existed, then he probably would have posted it somewhere. That would be my guess, because we got a whole bunch of other crazy weird videos. We got a whole bunch of he was no angel videos posted about him being involved in other random things. But
oh, you mean he beats up women? Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it was he beats up women, but the video that was posted. Oh, so wait, do you subscribe to the he was no angel argument too now because it's about a white guy?
God no. I think he should be tried as a 17-year-old. I don't think he should be tried as an adult. I think it's disproportionate the amount of black people who are obviously on average tried as adults when they're close to that age versus white people. But that's not the argument you're making. But no, I don't change that. It doesn't change the fact. I may despise Kyle Rittenhouse, and I may think honestly, if I look at the sum total of all this evidence, I cannot grant him the amount of clemency that you do to say that I don't think he has any direct association with far-right ideology.
Sure, I understand that. Can I just to be clear then?
But as a 17-year-old, he should be tried as a 17-year-old. Absolutely.
Sure. Just to be clear then. So you believe all of this, but you have zero direct evidence whatsoever of Rittenhouse around the time of the shooting ever engaging in any white nationalist behavior whatsoever, right?
Well, of course I don't.
Okay. All right. Okay. I mean, I guess you can believe what you want to believe. Anything else?
No, that was all of them.
Okay. All right. Be careful. Have fun.
Oh, wait. Okay, wait.
What?
Before you sign off, you always say that people on the left never say anything to your face that they tweet out later.
Oh yeah. Always.
If I tell you a joke to your face, can I tweet it out later without?
Knock yourself out. Go for it.
Okay. Destiny is like the Kim Jong-un of Twitch because when people don't pay enough attention to him, he goes nuclear. Is that?
Sure. Go for it. Sounds good.
So if I tweet that out, it's okay?
Go for it.
Okay. All right. Bye, Destiny.
Okay. Oh! Are you still here? Oh, fuck, he left. Never mind. I saw the quote in chat about how Kyle lied about his age and he was a medic. If they were friends, then he wouldn't have known that lie. True. Ugh. Okay. Remember to hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so that my videos show up right in your feed.